Доброго ранку, шановні учасники, гості нашого сьогоднішнього.
Good morning, everyone, dear guests. My name is Holopik Olesya. I represent the Company for the Safe Roads and the Center for Democracy and Rule of Law. I'm very glad you found the opportunity to join our event. Today we'll be talking about the speed limits as the key condition for the road safety. Today we will present you results of social surveys and we'll make our proposals on the state policy in this area. Among the organizers are the Center of Democracy and Rule of Law and the NGO Vision Zero. Everyone agrees that speed is one of the key factors in road safety. More than a lot of people die as a result of road collisions every year, and one of the problems is the absence of restrictions on speed limits, adequate restrictions on speed limits. And we believe that all the proposals should be based on real researches, real social surveys, where we can see the public opinions. And this policy should take into consideration best practices. So first, then we start our discussion. I would like to give the floor to Viktor Zagreba, advocacy manager of the campaign for road safety and founder of the NGO Vision Zero. He will share his opinion why speed is really serious problem and will present his results of measurement of speed of the average speed in Ukrainian cities. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your interest to this important problem. So, the speed. Olesya has said that everyone understands how serious this problem is, but unfortunately, not everyone in our society understands this, both among drivers and among pedestrians and among the officials. That's why we would like to draw more attention to this topic. So, where the problem lies? Everyone likes to drive on a bigger speed. We like driving, and of course it is more pleasant when you're driving very fast. But the speed, this is something that is on the one hand very pleasant, and on the other side it is a danger. And in our country this evil is legalized more than in other countries. Why the big speed is dangerous? First of all, the high speed increases the risk of the accident. It increases the probability of the collision. We made a publication that we distributed among you. There you can see facts about speed limits in Ukraine and related factors. For example, how much a vehicle needs how much time a vehicle needs to stop if it is driving 80 kilometers per hour or 50 kilometers per hour. If you are driving 50 kilometers per hour and something happens on the road, there is a child who came on the road or someone made something unpredictable, the driver can stop his vehicle during on the distance of 20-25 meters. These are European norms, 50 kilometers per hour. But if this is in Ukraine, where this is over 60 kilometers per hour, he needs more than 52 meters to stop his vehicle. And and in the first case, with speed 50 kilometers per hour, the driver has the chances to stop. But if he drives 80 kilometers per hour, he can cause serious injuries to the pedestrian or even death, and the driver can face criminal responsibility and a lot of other problems. So this is quite a sad problem for dozens of persons, the families of the injured, the family of the driver, and this will last for several years. So this is the first reason why the big speed is really a danger. The second reason is that the great speed can cause serious results, serious impacts. As the activist for road safety, I do not analyze the accidents where only car has several injuries. Several damages. Of course, this is unpleasant for the owner of the car. This causes additional work for the police. But for us, it is more important when a person is injured. The high speed increases the risk of lethal outcome. And in our statistics, you can see that the probability of death or chances for survival of the pedestrian depends on the speed. If this is 30-40 kilometers per hour, in more than half of cases the pedestrian will survive. He may be injured, but he will be alright in the result. But if the speed is more than 70 kilometers per hour, his chances of survival are almost zero. So almost in all cases when a driver was driving more than 80 kilometers per hour, the person who was hit will die. And this is a risk not only for pedestrians, this is also a problem for the drivers, because in Ukraine only few drivers use safety belts. And the car that hits something or overturns on the speed of 90 or 100 kilometers per hour, this accident will result in injuries or even death for drivers and his passengers. According to the statistics of road accidents in Ukraine, despite the fact that it is not full and complete, we are not sure that all these figures show the real state of things. So even according to these official statistics, 1,181 persons died in road accidents caused by violation of speed limits. And we think there is much more cases where people died, or we think that even 2,000 of persons died as a result of speed limitations. This may be careless driving or a drunk driving. In all these cases, when a pedestrian was hit and died in the result, in the majority of these cases, there was a violation of speed limit. We also take into consideration the cases where the pedestrians were hit on when crossing the road, etc. So, according to our assessment, 62% of all victims of road accidents died in the accidents where there was factor of violation of speed limits. I would like to say also about the results of empirical research on drivers' actions on the road. Here I will quote a book that is not very known. This is The Rules of Road Safety, and there is a rule that within a town or a village, a vehicle should drive no more than 60 kilometers per hour. And a lot of drivers forget about this, because a lot of drivers think that they are allowed to drive 80 kilometers per hour. No, this is wrong, 60 kilometers per hour. And our NGO, since during the last year, was making a research on the rules in the EU, in the US. We adapted this for Ukraine. We took radars for monitoring of speed, and we organize monitoring on several roads or in several towns. Now we have data from Voznesensk in Mykolaiv region and from Dolina in Ivano-Frankivsk region. These are cities through which run important highways, and we were measuring the speed of cars driving along these highways. We were simply standing on the side of the road and measuring. And 88% of all transport was going with a speed more than 80 kilometers. So actually, they violated the rules. Moreover, 27% of cars in Voznesensk and 37% in Dolina were driving on the speed 80 kilometers per hour and even more. So even taking into account this stereotype about 80 kilometers per hour, this is anyway a violation. This is inadequate speed, and people clearly do not understand how dangerous this is. We also monitor the situation in Ivano-Frankivsk, which is 7 streets, and as a result, this is quite a representative survey. There are passages for the pedestrians, there are traffic lights, and the majority of drivers are driving more than 60 kilometers per hour or even more than 80 kilometers per hour, and this is in the city. I suppose we can find the same picture in other cities, and soon we will be presenting results about Kiev and Kiev region. We will publish this report to show what is the real situation with respect of rules. Thank you, Victor. Your research has shown that now we are generating ideas about new rules on limitation of speed. I would like to give the floor to Ms. Oksana Sudoryk, expert of the international research company Ipsos, that will present one of a large social research within the project Modernization and Improvement of Road Safety in Ukraine. I'm very interested to hear the results of your survey and to hear what the people wait for from the government, how they would like this policy to change. Good morning. I would like to present you the results of social survey, which was conducted during 2016. This is a national survey. We had more than 800 interviews, and we had an additional interviews with drivers, and we had also a research in focus groups in Zhytomyr with drivers of private cars, with professional drivers, and also with people who are not drivers. Okay, first, a couple of words about the importance of speed as a factor in the road safety. When we usually ask people about probable reasons of the road accidents, speed is always mentioned among the 4 more frequent reasons of the accidents, together with careless driving, drunk driving, and violation of basic rules. When we're talking about the actions that are considered by the citizens as the most risky, and they were asked to select the three actions that are the most risky. They name such factors as drunk driving and violation of speed limits. So the people understand that high speed is dangerous. Then we analyzed how people perceive this problem, what they are waiting for from the state, how this problem is seen by the drivers themselves, and what could change their attitude to driving. First, I would like to present what people are waiting for from the state. We can see that people generally support the idea to amend the legislation and change the speed limits. For instance, the majority, 34% agreed that there should be lower speed limits. 32% of drivers agree with almost half of drivers agree with this, and the support for this proposal is higher among non-drivers. The 30 is in total almost 70% agree with this, and the proposal to increase speed limits within in the cities and villages. More than half agree. Among drivers, 32% rather agree, and 40% absolutely agree. And among the pedestrians, 41% rather agree, and 39% are totally agree. The majority of people, both drivers and non-drivers, support the idea to introduce more serious penalties for a violation of speed limits. If we analyze different subgroups, the level of support of such initiatives on more strict speed limits and on improvement of infrastructure is among the groups of risk, or among groups that are more inclined to safe behavior. For instance, we offered people to answer a question whether they agree that there should be artificial obstacles on the road to make the drivers reduce the speed of their vehicle. And this measure is usually supported in the villages, supported by the parents of small children, and by the drivers who generally use safety belts. So we can see that these categories usually support us, and we can ask for their support when trying to promote initiatives on road safety. Let's come to drivers' attitude. And let's see how often they actually violate speed limits. 40% of drivers believe that for a driver, as they are, it is almost okay to violate the speed limit sometimes. And if we asked them how often they violate the speed limits for more than 20 kilometers per hour, 40% said that this is rather often, 39% said that this is rather often, and in total, if we take everyone who said that they are doing this sometimes, this is in total 58% of drivers. What results it can cause for the driver? We can see that among those who are within this group, 23% had experience of minor road accidents over the past 5 years, and this resulted in small injuries or damages to their car. And among those who said they do not violate the speed for more than 20 kilometers per hour, there are only 12% of those who had any experience of road accidents. When we are asking people, well, imagine that you are a driver and you are driving in high speed. What associations do you have? we can see that people are talking about both positive and negative associations. Among positive emotions, they mention pleasure, freedom, independence, etc. And among the negative emotions, they mention risk and sense of danger. Among those who usually violate speed limits are usually talking about positive emotions in this context. And then we ask them, well, what are your associations when you see someone violated speed limits? We can see that this attitude is less positive. As usual, drivers say that they think about risk, danger, collision, etc. So our society has kind of double standards. So if I am a driver, I'm sure that everything will be okay, that I keep control on my car, and I can violate speed limits a little bit. But if someone else is doing this is unacceptable, this causes risk both for him and for me, and they shouldn't do it. And these double standards are quite typical for the majority of drivers. How we can communicate these groups and persuade them to behave themselves in a more safe way? When we were asking them what they are afraid as a result of the road accident, of course they answered that the worst result would be the death, especially the death of a pedestrian, than his own death, or disability for a driver or for a pedestrian that has been hit. These are the worst results to which we can appeal when talking about the road safety. Because this is more persuasive than risks of damages to the car or a risk to lose driver's license. What can motivate the people to respect the rules on the speed limits? Among the factors that had been mentioned very often, we see the same factors: risk of death to a driver or to other person, or risk to become disabled, etc. And people care less about material losses. What is the reason for such picture? First of all, people perceive themselves as very good drivers. They're a bit too self-confident. And just to persuade them that they really can get into a road accident, we must show them facts that would give them understanding what are real results of violation of speed limits. We should explain difference between how the braking distance differ if they are driving this or that speed. What is the risk of what are the chances of survival for a pedestrian if a driver is driving on this or that speed? When people see this picture, they become ready to change their opinion and to change their attitude. Thank you, Oksana, for this very deep research. And now I would like to come to the next stage of our discussion: what we should change in the state policy to deal with this problem, how we can reduce the risks of violation of speed limits. And here I give the floor to Taras Shevchenko, director of the Center for Democracy and Rule of Law. Thank you, Olesya. Good morning, dear colleagues. I support all the opinions that were said here. The speed is the major reason of death on the road. This can be confirmed by statistics. Very often Ukrainians mention other reasons among those who which cause death on the road, such as bad infrastructure, etc. Because for people it is more pleasant that not only they personally are guilty of these, that this is also bad infrastructure, or these are inadequate drivers who are driving drunk, etc. But in the majority of cases, this is violation of speed limits that results in very, very bad accidents. And we can say that violation of speed limits is almost a risk to kill. And it can happen to everyone who violates speed limits. Those who fortunately did not have such an experience can hope that it will never happen to them, but who knows? And it is shocking that in the state where for this reason more than 1,000 persons die per year as a result of violation of speed limits, that this state did nothing to change the situation. These figures may seem quite small when we say that nearly 10 persons die every day in all the regions of Ukraine. These figures seem quite small because comparing to a plane crash when several hundreds of persons die, of course, this event looks more shocking. And all people start talking about how security on board can be improved, etc., etc. But as a result, we see the picture when during the year, more than 1,000 of persons die on the roads every year, and this statistics is worse than in Europe. In Ukraine, we have no photo fixation of violation of speed limits. My colleagues have already mentioned the major reasons of these problems, and I will give my proposals. Within the campaign for safe roads, we prepared an analytical note with the proposals of amendments to the state policy. Change to the state policy means that this will be a systematic change, that there will be changes to rules not only in the several area, but on the scope of the whole state. We based this analytical note on the international best practices and the experience of the WHO, because this organization described the main risk factors which cause death on the road. They mentioned 5 key factors, and also they have shown what achieved those countries which managed to reduce the risk of accidents because of violation of speed limits. And we are submitting the following proposals. The first one is to increase penalties. We can see that more than 65% of Ukrainians support the idea of more strict penalties for a violation of speed limits. This is a rather high figure. Politicians often think that the opinion will be more negative, but we can see, according to the results of the survey, that more than 2/3 support this idea. 25% of Ukrainians say they will alter their opinion when the penalties will be increased. And 1/4 of drivers is a rather big figure. And of course, the fear of death and fear of injuries can make people alter their opinion, but not always. And fortunately, the increasement of penalties have turned out to be efficient in many countries to change drivers' attitude. When we are talking about violation of speed limits, and address such documents as facts about violation of speed limits. We can see that if we compare Ukraine, Poland, and Spain, when that in Ukraine for a violation of speed, in Ukraine this is a penalty, but in Spain this is a revoke of driver's license, and we can change something here. A short revocation of driver's license will be a good measure, because if we will simply cancel the driver's license for the violation, it can increase corruption risks. And if the driver's license will be recalled for maybe 3 months, I think they will have no reason to try to give a bribe to a police officer. And of course, penalties, higher penalties, is not a sufficient measure. We should also take non-fiscal measures, for example, a prevention that will result in a double penalty for a driver when he violates the rule for the second time. We can punish the driver first by a document, but when he violates the rule for the second time, he will pay 2 times more than after the first violation. The next position, this is implementation of photo fixation system. In conditions when this will take many times, perhaps this is not the best reason to do something, but in our situation, when the speed is almost uncontrolled, it is unacceptable, and we need such measures as photo fixation. And of course, such comments, the comments from that we hear from the Ministry of Infrastructure are not relevant, I think. Then it is necessary to reduce to eliminate this practice when if a person violates the speed limits in no more than 20 kilometers per hour, it is not punished. For instance, in the cities, if the speed limit is 60 kilometers per hour, everyone is driving 80, and no one imposes fines for this. The police officers simply do not stop these drivers. We should reduce this additional plus 20 to at least plus 10. Another European practice is to impose limit of 50 kilometers per hour inside the cities and villages. We think that all these measures should be taken all together. All these measures are prescribed, are used in the world best practices. The next issue is infrastructure. I'm talking about special infrastructure that is reducing risks of death on the road. Of course, this measure needs a lot of financement, a lot of investment, especially now when we allocate finances for the roads. I'm talking about special demarcation on the road and special traffic lights, when this mechanism can fix the cars that violated the speed. Then next measure should be information campaign. It is very important to explain people why it is important to drive more carefully and respect the rules. And the highest efficiency of the information campaign is usually in the cases when it comes together with the legislative changes. In other cases, if we start information campaign without any other actions, it will have no influence. There are many people who violate the law simply because they are indifferent, and I'm afraid information campaign would not have any impact on them. There is a part of road users who respect the rules because they feel responsible for their behavior, but unfortunately they are the minority. And the experience have shown that the shift of the opinion usually happens through penalties. So a person first starts to respect the law because they are afraid of penalty, and only then they start respecting the law because they understand their responsibility. So once again, reducement of speed limits and improvement of infrastructure and information campaign will help us to improve safety on roads. If more than 1,000 of persons die every year because of violation of speed limits, these are not losses of life. This causes other damages for the country. And if the state would pay more attention to this topic, we would have less such cases, maybe 2 times less. And this is very important because this is not about slight damages on cars. This is about people's life, about lives of our children, and that's why our organization Center for Democracy and Rule of Law joined this campaign, because we believe that this is very important, and this is something that is actually real to change, because there are problems which need a lot of investment, which are practically unreal, but this is real. Thank you, Taras, for your proposals, and to sum up, I would like to add that all these proposals that have been offered by our experts are described in this document, and you can find it on the website of the Center of Center of Democracy and the Rule of Law and of the NGO Vision Zero. And welcome for discussion, because only together we can do something with this problem. I would like to add here that we are talking here about the speed as a key factor, but it is also important to say about safety belts. If a person doesn't use safety belt, it has worse risks in the case of collision. These are very related factors, safety belts and the speed limits, because in Ukraine we often see that people do not use safety belts and are violating the speed limits. Thank you, dear colleagues. We will finish here. The next event will start in some minutes.